Hey everybody, happy Thursday. Today is Monday, January 28th. It's my mother's birthday. And welcome to another edition of TechStrong TV. I am Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am so excited about today's broadcast. We have an excellent lineup of interviews and discussions for your viewing enjoyment. Lots of topics that we're going to be covering in today's episode. We're going to kick things off with an interview that Alan has with Sheng Liang of Rancher Labs. We're going to be talking about the Longhorn 1.1 version, talking about what it includes and what it means for the cloud native space. Longhorn has actually been a sandbox project of the Cloud Native Computing Foundation since October 2019. So now that it's kind of been in general release, it's definitely making some waves. And one of the things that it allows DevOps teams to do is they can manage persistent data volumes in any Kubernetes environment and really offer a vendor-neutral approach to cloud native storage. So that is a great technology. And so Sheng and Alan talk about really what it means for the space. So it's a great conversation, definitely one worth checking out. After that conversation, Alan has a conversation with Colton Andrus, who's the CEO of Gremlin. Gremlin just recently released its State of Chaos Engineering Report and Survey. So Colton and Alan talk about the results of that survey and some of the ways that organizations are using chaos engineering. I'm a big fan of chaos engineering because I think it really does add a level of intensity to testing environments and really understanding where the gaps are in systems and in technologies and helping organizations really beef up their infrastructure. So I am super excited to have to hear about this conversation between Alan and Colton about the survey results and what organizations are seeing. After that conversation, we have part 3 of our usual regular Haunted Hacker podcast with Mike Jones as the host. This one is a great one. As I said, this is part 3 of the 3-part series. We ran parts 1 and 2 on Monday and Tuesday. And the guests for this week's episode are hacktivists Ghost Exodus, Jesse McGraw, and Patrick, a.k.a. John 5 from ETA and Anonymous. So great conversation that they have, and it's a continuation of what they were speaking about earlier this week. So definitely one worth checking out. After that, we have our monthly installment from Gitlab called The Lab. It's a podcast that's hosted by Brendan O'Leary. He comes on and provides the monthly Gitlab updates. So if you are a Gitlab user, definitely take a listen to this so you can see what's going on with the company and what their updates are. All right. After that, we have our Something Old section. Maya Berlerner did a conversation recently that discusses DevOps from the bottoms up DevOps. Talking about the common life cycles of bottoms-up DevOps projects and their use of specific open source tools and commercial tools, as well as the pros and cons of each, including technical depth. So if your organization has taken a bottoms-up approach to DevOps, maybe you want to give this one a listen and see what she has to say about it. After that, I come back on and I do the news headlines for Thursday. And then I have a conversation with Dan Conrad, who's a field strategist at One Identity. He's come back onto TechStrong TV, and he and I have a conversation about a recent report that One Identity came out with that highlights the challenges organizations are facing with using Microsoft Active Directory and adopting Azure Microsoft Active Directory, some of the potential pitfalls and definitely some of the things that organizations need to keep in mind as they do adopt Azure Microsoft Active Directory. And after that, I do the webinar preview, and then Mitch Ashley comes on with his usual Analyst Corner segment. He is talking about the security of DevOps tool chains and situations like the SolarWinds attack. We all know, the severity of the SolarWinds attack, but it was really much more than just a supply chain attack. So Mitch talks about how under the covers, it was actually a software build process attack. So interesting conversation there. Hopefully it will be illuminating to you as much as it is to me. After that, Mike Vizard comes on. He's got a conversation with Shane Johnson, who is a Senior Director of Product Marketing at MariaDB. They have a conversation about why an alternative to the MySQL database is gaining traction. MariaDB has been around for a couple of years, and it's had a slow movement of growth. It's been slow and steady, and who knows, maybe this is the year that MariaDB catches up with, or maybe even usurps the MySQL database. So we'll see what happens with that. But it's definitely a great conversation between the two. So check it out. All right, that's today's lineup, and it's a great one. And we are going to get started with all the fun right after this commercial message.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond, CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
All right, welcome back. First up, we have a conversation between Alan and Sheng Liang of Rancher Labs. They talk about the release of Longhorn 1.1, and Sheng gives us all the details, so let's give this one a listen.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us here on another episode or interview for TechStrong TV. My guest this interview is my friend Sheng Liang. Sheng, this is the first time you've been on since the beginning of the year anyway, so I guess a Happy New Year is in order, Sheng. How are you, my friend?
Very good.
Good to see you. So, Sheng, if people watch TechStrong TV, they know who you are. But just in case people don't, let's give them a quick little background. I guess we'll start with, you were CEO, founder of Rancher Labs, people behind several open source projects, Rancher OS and more. And then Rancher Labs was, of course, acquired by SUSE, and that closed probably right around at the end of last year.
That's right, in November. December. That's right.
Yep. And you're with SUSE, Vice President, Engineering and Innovation, or did I mess that one up?
Yeah, I managed SUSE's global engineering team and building open source products and bring to the market many more innovative open source projects in the coming years.
I can't think of a person better suited for that role than you, Sheng. So good for you.
Thank you.
Let's talk a little bit though that you're here today with some new news around a Rancher Labs open source project. It's your story, Sheng. You tell them.
Yeah, I'm really excited that we launched Longhorn 1.1. It is a project that I've actually personally been working on for the last 6 years. And less than a couple of years ago, a year and a half ago, we donated Longhorn to CNCF, and it became a CNCF sandbox project. And since then, the growth of it has really taken off. It's been growing, 3 digits percentage year over year, and because it solves a pressing need. It brings persistent storage to any Kubernetes cluster You have Kubernetes. Kubernetes, as we know, could be deployed everywhere. And but traditionally, most people run Kubernetes to handle their stateless workload. Folks who needed a stateful workload had to load drivers and connect Kubernetes to either a cloud storage or some kind of an on-premise storage array. What Longhorn does is it kind of brings persistent storage into an existing Kubernetes cluster by aggregating and virtualizing existing local disk drives, sort of a little bit like the Nutanix kind of story for server virtualization. You don't need dedicated storage systems to run a persistent workload anymore. So with Longhorn, it's the easiest way to get started with persistent workload on Kubernetes. And this is our 1.1 release that we just launched.
Excellent. Thank you so much for the background on that. Sheng, if I'm not mistaken, Longhorn was donated to CNCF or put under CNCF auspices. What was it? Late 2019, right?
That's right. I think it's in it's the second half of 2019. So it's been just over a year and a half.
Yep. And is this the first big release since then, right? This is the first one.
It's actually it's the second big release now.
Oh, 1.0 came out with CNCF as well?
Yeah, the first one is the 1.0. So 1.0 came out, I think, last June. That was when Longhorn
You're right.
hit
Right. That was the
readiness.
June 2020. That was the launch in June 2020, but it was donated to CNCF, I think around November or something in 2019.
That's right.
That's the timeline. That's why we got confused, Sheng. I apologize.
No problem.
Yeah, that's what it was. And and look, CNCF, of course, incubates and graduates and mentors many, many projects. Longhorn, of course, being one of them. What's the big news in version 1.1, Sheng?
Yeah, I mean, thanks for the question. I'd love to kind of go through some of the things that 1.1 delivers, because more than anything else, it shows you how mature and ready for mainstream deployment storage has become now. In the early days, I remember people at bring to market, big features like snapshot, backup. Those things were solved years ago. And if you look at 1.1, if I kind of go through, one of the things it does is we did a lot of work to make Longhorn work well on the edge. The Kubernetes is going everywhere, and edge environments, meaning those computers that don't sit in your large data center, aren't provisioned in a cloud. They might be in a branch office, they might be in an embedded system, they might be running in a car. So all of those environments are these days are pretty much powered by Linux, and Kubernetes is becoming a very attractive choice to manage a small cluster of servers. And in most of these cases, there really isn't a dedicated storage system available. So it makes Longhorn even more important, be able to have reliable storage that supports snapshot and backup. And in this release, this is also the first release we support ARM64, which is a very popular
standard
edge platform. So that's a big deal. We brought to market a very important missing feature of Longhorn. It's called read-write many storage volumes. That is the ability to allow multiple containers to read and write into the same volume. That wasn't available before, and a lot of Kubernetes applications demand it, and so we're finally able to support that. It's a very big deal for people for those people who have a workload that demands that. And then the next one is just the ever increasing maturity. You know, now with 1.1, Prometheus is baked in, and you can get the real-time metrics and stats and resource usage, monitoring, tracking, all of that information straight out of the Longhorn system through Prometheus. So it's not only a system you can use, but it's a system you can operate very, very effectively. And finally, I just want to mention a couple of important features around performance and maintainability. You know, a lot of times when you deploy these storage systems in fairly, you know, arbitrary or fairly sort of unreliable environments, like edge computing environments, or maybe in a data center that's not quite up to the standard of you know, the traditional corporate data center or internet data center or large cloud scaling, cloud computing environments. Networking is not always reliable, especially networking between multiple nodes in a Longhorn cluster. So in this release, we added this capability called data locality, meaning like as Longhorn replicates data across multiple nodes, you can tell Longhorn to always keep a copy of the data in the node where the workload runs. So that's really good, because that means if there's any kind of breakage of network, storage doesn't immediately get impacted. So you can still read and write to the local copy of data, but obviously it's not being, you know, efficiently replicated to other nodes anymore. But that will probably get delayed. But you know in that moment of time, you're sacrificing redundancy. But then when the network come back, then the replication will catch up. So that's a really important feature as we, you know, push the deployment of Kubernetes out of traditional 5.9, 3.9, you know, enterprise data centers and cloud environments into more edge and branch office environments. So those are just some of the capabilities we're shipping in 1.1. It is an incremental release. It's not, you know, like I said, it's not you know,
not 2.0
the complete, in 1.0. But you can, hopefully you get a flavor, just the attention to performance, attention to reliability, attention to operations. That's literally where Longhorn is as a technology.
Sure. Sheng, let's address, there are people who are watching this out there saying, but wait a second, I thought they gave this to the CNCF. Why? It sounds like Sheng is really intimately still involved, you know, in this. Why don't you explain that for them, Sheng, about your relationships to the Longhorn and CNCF?
Yeah, I mean, Longhorn was developed entirely by Rancher, and the great thing about contributing to CNCF is we contribute the brand, the governance of this project over to CNCF, because that enables, that encourages a lot of companies to come join the Longhorn effort. When they use Longhorn, they realize, you know, the future of Longhorn is not tied to the future of SUSE or Rancher, and there's really nothing SUSE or Rancher can do to direct the project in a direction that the community doesn't want to go. So one of the great things, for example, I mentioned the ability for Longhorn 1.1 to run on ARM. That's actually not developed by SUSE or by Rancher. It's developed by some other company, and that was contributed into the upstream project. And now, you know, SUSE, Rancher, and then the entire open source community is able to benefit. So that's really the difference. As Longhorn becomes a CNCF project, you'll see a very diverse set of developers and users, and that's why the adoption is going through the roof. But you can still always rely on SUSE as a business to provide the mission critical enterprise support for this for the CNCF project.
Got it. And then Shane, personally, your involvement with CNCF.
Yeah, I was privileged to be elected to become a member of the technical oversight committee of CNCF, and that's a very important group of people inside CNCF, because we decide what projects could get into the CNCF. We kind of charter the CNCF's technical vision, and since CNCF is primarily a collection of projects, the Technical Oversight Committee, the TOC, plays a very important role.
Sure does. Sure does. Shane, I'm really, for people who were maybe worried or concerned or had questions about the Rancher Labs acquisition by SUSE, I mean, certainly from this release, you can see that, yes, you're now VP at SUSE and Rancher is part of SUSE, but the commitment to the projects, to the solutions that Rancher brought to the world remains strong, stronger than ever even. And, I think that's big.
Yeah, we could not have found a better home for Rancher. SUSE has certainly has the resources, has the global business to support all of our customers to keep these projects going. But more importantly, SUSE is the ultimate open source company, right? I must say, in the last couple of months since I officially started at SUSE, I'm just so impressed with the passion out of the entire company and the dedication of SUSE engineers, when it comes to developing open source. SUSE really is the best place in the world to develop open source technology. And I'm so glad and proud to be part of it.
Hey, I think that's a great place to end this interview right there, Shane. Perfect. Anyway, my friend, hey, congratulations on Rancher 1.1. Sounds like an amazing release, chock full of good stuff in there. Congratulations on the continuing success within SUSE. I'm sure if we asked them, they'd say they're lucky to have you as well. So keep doing what you're doing. Yep. Come back and see us soon. And Shane, look, I'm counting the days sooner, maybe than later. We can meet in person at a conference again, right?
Likewise.
Yep. Sheng Liang, VP, SUSE, here discussing the recent release of Rancher 1.1 under the auspices of CNCF. This is Alan Schimmel for TechStrong TV. We're going to be right back with our next guest.
All right, welcome back. Next up, we've got Alan and Colton Andrus from Gremlin talk about the State of Chaos Engineering report and survey from Gremlin. Interesting findings about chaos engineering and what companies are doing. So let's give it a listen.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everyone. This is Alan Schimmel. Thanks for joining us on another episode of TechStrong TV. My guest this segment is my friend Colton Andrus of Gremlin. Colton, welcome back. How you been, man?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me back again, Alan.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you on. Got no funny background or anything now? We look like we're in your home office there, or your office.
Rearranged last week. I love my Colorado backgrounds of the mountains and the snow, but I can show off some of my Gremlin swag here.
Yeah, I see some cool Gremlin swag back there. Pretty cool, man. So Colton, look, I think most of our audience is more than familiar with Gremlin, but you never know. Maybe someone out here has never heard of Gremlin before. Why don't we start there, if you don't mind? Give us a little bit of Gremlin, 30 seconds, whatever.
Sure.
So people understand.
So quick background of myself, engineer by trade, had the opportunity to work at Amazon and Netflix. At both places, I focused on reliability. And we built tooling and influenced the culture to help get them to 4 nines or better of availability. We did that through what's now chaos engineering. And what's exciting at Gremlin is we built the world's first chaos engineering platform, works across all cloud providers, containers, bare metal hosts, makes it safe, secure, and simple to cause the failures that can occur, to prepare for them, to prevent incidents and outages.
Absolutely. So Colton, and Gremlin, we should mention, is one of the leaders in this, the burgeoning field of chaos engineering, and it's a rapidly growing field. We're seeing a lot of attention being paid to it, Colton. You guys recently released your kind of state of chaos engineering report, correct?
That's right. Just went live.
Really? Oh, okay, cool. And before we go further, I'm sure people can get that off of Gremlin.
Gremlin.com/state of chaos engineering, or of course, LinkedIn, Twitter, or social, or numerous places.
Very cool. So this isn't the first time you've done the report, is it?
This is the inaugural report.
Okay. Very cool. So what made you do this?
We've been wanting to do this for years. So a little background, today is actually the 5-year anniversary of the founding of Gremlin. And
really, congratulations.
Early days, me and my co-founder building the product, out doing founder-led sales, scrappy, helping to develop the category. And we had our original hypotheses. Chaos engineering is a core part of building highly available distributed systems. The folks that do it well get paid less and reap the benefits of a more reliable platform. But early days, there weren't that many customers doing it. We can't write a report that says all of Netflix and Amazon say X and everyone else, who knows? And so what's exciting is we were able to go across the industry, talk to hundreds of different SREs and engineers from lots of companies, not just Gremlin customers, to collect these results and to publish this report.
Excellent, man. Excellent. You know what? Let's jump into the report. Because I've done my share of reports over the years, and what always gets me are the questions that I didn't see that coming, right? I didn't expect to see this. Where others are, it's really just kind of verifying what you already knew, and to a certain extent, those are. They're good to have that verification, obviously, but they're not as exciting as the wow, I didn't see those coming. But let me ask you, what were your highlights of this report?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to capture it. So things that I expected or hoped to see, teams that run chaos engineering regularly, and we looked at quarterly, monthly, weekly, daily, or whenever we think about it. And you see the correlation that teams that are running it regularly are more likely to be in that 4 nines bucket. And you see that in 2 nines, people are doing less of it and it's more ad hoc. So that's one I expected. Another one that I expected was around network attacks. So we're all building distributed systems. And my favorite distributed systems joke is someone else's system that can break mine is the cause of most outages. And so that's where people are finding a lot of value. What happens when my internal dependency goes down? What happens when my external service provider has an issue? And speaking of, one of the things we're announcing today is we've expanded the Gremlin free offering. So when we launched it 2 years back, we had only a subset of the attacks. You could run CPU, you could run memory, and you could run shutdown attacks. Well, today, because we've seen the value of network attacks, we're allowing people to use all of Gremlin's attacks. So you can use the network attacks, the time travel attacks, the disk attacks, the process killers attacks, because we want to help hasten the maturity of this market. We want to build upon the trends we're seeing.
That's great, man. That's good news, and good news for our audience out there. Go take advantage of that. So Colton, what were the big surprises, if any, in the report for you think?
Yeah, one thing, I guess kind of a surprise, was how many people are leveraging chaos engineering on Kubernetes. 60% of the people that replied are running chaos experiments against Kubernetes.
Really?
It's rare to see one platform winning so strongly. I think we see a lot of buzz in the market. It's interesting to see rubber meet road in that regard.
Yeah, no, you know what? I think that kind of jives with what we're seeing, not necessarily with chaos engineering, but with Kubernetes usage in general. I mean, we saw something where like 75% of all new applications on Amazon, on AWS, are Kubernetes based. Now, granted, that may be greenfield applications, not brownfield, but still, I mean, that's a substantial, I mean, that's a critical mass, right? That's dominant, you know, I don't want to use the M word, but it's dominant. And I don't know if that'll stay like that or not. You know, Colton, one of the things I always worry about with surveys is, look, you know, it's the hammer and nail thing. So you're a chaos engineering company doing a survey on the state of chaos engineering. How many people do we get who aren't into chaos engineering, right? How do we, because if they're not into chaos engineering, they may not be coming to Gremlin. They may not know about the survey. So do my results get skewed that way? Talk to us about kind of demographics. How'd you reach people? You know, how do we get, you know, non-chaos engineering folks giving us their opinions here as well?
Yeah, well, it's definitely a great question. We want to make sure that we are capturing the folks that are doing it, because those are the folks that have gotten their hands dirty. And those are the learnings we want to hear. The folks that have heard it and think it's a cool idea, but have yet to pick it up and take any action, it's an interesting part of the survey. So we focused on SREs and operations related folks, but we didn't focus on just chaos engineering people. And so, yes, part of it was going out through our networks and through the reach we had with Twitter and social media. Part of it was going out and making sure that we were talking to folks that were in the broader community.
Excellent. Again, having done these in the past at companies I helped found. So of course, now you want to take the learnings of these surveys, right? And apply them to what you're doing at Gremlin, right? So what do you think, you know, as a result of this survey or of these, you know, the questions and the answers from the survey, what, you know, how does Gremlin respond? What do you think? How does this influence your road forward?
Yeah. So on one hand, there's the changes to free to give people access.
Right. That's a big one,
more
right?
Valuable. So that's a pretty straightforward one. You know, your point is we want to learn from our customers and from the market that are having success and be able to share that with the broader market. And so this is a high level. Yes, the indications are there that this is valuable. We want to go a level deeper. We want to be able to draw not just chaos engineering helps us get to reliability, but chaos engineering through these specific steps are what help teams to meet that reliability challenge. And so we have some work to do to get in with customers, both our customers and other people's customers, to understand what they're doing specifically that's leading to that value and those outcomes. One thing that's interesting in the survey is we asked, what are the biggest inhibitor to adoption? And that one was a pretty even mixed answer. There's like 6 options, and it's like, there's other priorities. We don't have time. We don't know enough. We have some fear that things might go wrong. And the answers there were fairly split. And so to me, I'm looking for what is, is there one boulder I can move out of the way to help people move faster within their companies? And it feels like there was no clear answer there. So I want a better answer of what's inhibiting or preventing people from getting going so that we can, again, accelerate that.
Agreed. What about the broader chaos engineering market community? How's the survey helping them?
Yeah, well, we had an opportunity last time we spoke a bit about Amazon announced their chaos engineering service.
Yeah.
We had an opportunity to meet with that team, and they're very friendly and they're interested in evangelizing the market and proving the value as much as we are. And so we've had some great partnership and cloud provider discussions in the past 6 weeks, 8 weeks since that's happened. And we're all aligned that we're building a new category, we're evangelizing a new practice, and there's a lot of opportunity for partnership and overlap. So what do we want? We want all of those teams that are building their own tooling and product to help us run this report in a more comprehensive, broader sense next time so that we get a better view of what the entire community looks like.
Love it. Yeah. Through COVID, through everything, certainly 2020 was a year, I think, chaos engineering, I don't want to say became mature because I don't know if it's truly mature yet. I think there's still a lot of growth ahead of it. But I think it's something that really came onto everybody's radar screens, at least, right? And so as we look forward, evangelizing with the likes of AWS and others, what else do you see, is kind of really helping to boost the, that rising tide that's going to lift all the boats in chaos engineering?
Yeah, the number one, I think we spoke about this a little last time, so I apologize if I repeat myself, but a couple of years ago, the biggest question is why? And that kind of spoke to the maturity of the market. Again, the biggest question now is how. And so the biggest opportunity we have this year is to make it easy for people to do the right thing. It's to make it easy for them to get the value from chaos engineering, to make it clear that that's saving them time, saving their customers pain, saving their companies money. And some folks take that on faith and trust. Some folks have done a lot of great work that prove it, but making that ubiquitous and understood is a challenge. And so that's a place that we can all work together to share the stories, but to share the metrics-driven, success-based outcome stories that really highlight the value of the practice. And to me, that's when we'll see it. We can call it, maybe we're no longer immature or young, but we're not yet mature. And when the ROI, the process, and the discipline are fairly well understood and there's good alignment in the community, then I think we can say it's matured.
Agreed. I agree with that 100%, man. Colton, the free tests that are now available, are they going to be forever free at this point? Or do you think this is just a phase or whatever you want to call it?
I'm one that believes that once you put something out there, you don't take it back.
That genie's out of the bottle.
So look, early days, we wanted to be thoughtful. We want to build a business and make sure our customers are getting value, but we want to make sure people can learn and get their hands dirty. I think what we're seeing is chaos engineering, the platform side is becoming more of a commodity. And so that's a valuable and a necessary part. But a lot of what we're doing is in the product, in our team, in the guidance, and how we're helping customers be successful. That's really where we're going to win. And so let's make it easy for people to get their hands dirty, to get that initial value, to overcome their apprehension. And then we'll be in a position to show them how Gremlin is the partner that they really want to help them build reliable systems.
Very cool, man. Hey, we're coming up on the end of time, but I wanted to just check in. Any news on virtual conference?
So we're going to be holding 2 conferences this year.
Maybe not a virtual conference, but go ahead.
Yeah, it will be virtual. We're planning the second version of Failover Conf in April of this year. So last year, the focus was not on chaos engineering, but on reliability. And a lot of people enjoyed that and got a lot of value of that. So we're going to do that again this spring. And then we're planning Chaos Conf this fall again in October, but we're not yet sure. We're pretty sure it's going to be virtual. We're pretty sure that this year it's prudent to plan for virtual events. And we know there's some fatigue, and we're thinking of ways to make it interesting and interactive and get out of your seat. That's my requirement. Can I just get out of my seat for a few minutes every day? So we have both of those on the horizon.
Excellent. You know what? We'll be looking forward to it. Hey, Colton, great work on this survey. You know what? Anything that shines a light on the benefits of chaos engineering and that it's real and it's a thing out there for people, I think is a great thing for not only for Gremlin, but for the whole industry. So good stuff, man. I appreciate you coming on. Come back and join us soon.
Absolutely. It's always a pleasure. Thank you for your time, Alan.
Thank you. Colton Andrus, CEO, co-founder at Gremlin. Check out the new State of Chaos Engineering survey, and go check out all the free tests that they're making available now for free, and the name Free Test. But this is Alan Schimmel for TechStrong TV. We'll be right back with our next guest.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
All right, next up, we've got the part 3 of the Haunted Hacker podcast with Mike Jones. Great conversation between him and Jesse McGraw, also known as Ghost Exodus, and Patrick, a.k.a. John 5, from ETA and Anonymous. They continue the conversation that they've been having all week, so let's give it a listen.
There's Patrick. What's up, Patrick?
Yo.
So we have a lot of people here. I want to thank Kevin, too, for showing up and being part of the podcast. He and I go way back, and I'm proud to call him a friend. So questions, what MSF module are you using? So Colin, the module's really easy. It is the Android. You can see, just Control C this. Within Metasploit, Go ahead.
It just said the host would like me to unmute, so I muted.
Let's see. So the module that I'm using within Metasploit, so I'm not actually using a module, I'm using a handler, a multi-handler for the Android. And so with that, you set the Android and the payload, which is the interpreter payload for the Android device. And then you set your local host, you set your port, and then you just run it. And it basically acts like a netcat listener. And it listens on the port. I would suggest not using port 444, which is the default. Maybe hide it in 443 or 8080 or web traffic. That's probably the most effective and the least picked up on. And have you tried to run it on an Android device with any kind of malware protection software on it? So, yeah, so I have with the one in the UK and didn't have a problem with it, because when something is coming over and it's signed, a lot of the malware antivirus applications for cell phones, which are very few and far between, look at that and say, oh, well, it's signed, it's encrypted, there's not much I can see. Any type of antivirus has a problem with looking past the encryption. And so that's kind of a protection level. Who else? I'm sure, Patrick, you've used Interpreter for Android devices and done APKs, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. You want to share some information about it?
Yeah, so I pack them up pretty good. So I mean, I got experience in Java programming and stuff like that. So, you know, I mean, my advice for trying to block something like that is not only on the certificate level, but you know, watch port traffic, obviously. Most kids are like you said, they're going to use 8080 and 444, you know, and something simple. You know, most of them are, you know, just out there trying to see if they can get somebody, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Me, I'm a little more sophisticated. You know, I use port numbers that are unrecognizable. You know, and definitely, you know, you got to understand SSH tunneling, PPS, you know, so there's a lot more to it than, you know, just hosting it on your cloud VM.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I mentioned like AWS and external servers, because there's a lot of different ways that you can host that file and get away with it. I mean, it's really simple, but you have to look at the whole anatomy of the attack, right? You have to look at the way the APK responds, the way that the Play Store or whoever looks at that APK when you execute it on a phone. And the payload is really important as well. But if you can wrap it with some level of encryption and be successful at it, and like you said, like the Java signature and certificate is like really important. And that's kind of, that's where I went with it as far as like wrapping it and deploying it. Was I used a lot of that. So anybody else have any questions? Was thinking more 0-day type protections. I don't know, to be honest with you, I don't know any type of 0-day protection or antivirus or anti-malware for Androids. Because when you talk about 0-day protection, you're talking about protection for something that's not known. That's very difficult to even begin to fathom. Because if it's a 0-day, there's nothing that's going to stop it until it's identified, analyzed, and put into some sort of engine. So yeah, I wouldn't use 0-day in that. I would use more complex or complicated attacks, something that detects that. So what else? And this is your guys' time. Like, you can open up your mics and ask questions, and it doesn't necessarily have to be about the exploit or even how I did this, but we can talk about whatever you guys feel is important. You just want to shoot the shit or whatever. What I do want to talk about and kind of promote is next week, me, Patrick, I don't see Ghost Exodus. He was here earlier. Ghost Exodus and Alberto are going to all get together and have a joint podcast talking about our lives with different groups. We all come from some very complex backgrounds. A couple of us have just recently gotten out of federal, oversight. So yeah, it's going to be really cool. And all of us have been in different groups, which kind of cross paths and kind of mixed and splintered. And yeah, it's going to be really cool. I'm looking forward to it.
I agree. Such a mixture of, you know, I mean, I don't know. It's so weird when I meet people and then you find out, you know, that background of them, you know, and you're like, oh yeah, I knew you. You know, I seen you in a chat room one time or something. Yeah. It's just amazing, you know, like, over the years, it's been interesting, man. So happy to be a part of the community.
For sure, yeah. Like, yeah, I remember when you got sent to me, and I was kind of like, why do I need to talk to this guy? And then I figured it out, and it was kind of like jaw dropper. And then all of a sudden, here comes Ghost Exodus. And I'm like, yeah, I kind of remember that too. And it just spreads, right? So I think we're all kind of getting over that past situation and kind of catching up. And like the term birds of a feather flock together is an absolutely true term, because I think people like us with our mindsets, doesn't matter how much time or how much distance has occurred, we always seem to find each other on the internet somehow. And it's weird.
That's true.
Yeah, it's wicked.
I agree.
Yeah. So we can't unmute ourselves. It's still disabled. Let's take a look.
I have a question, Mike. It's Vicky.
Hey, Vicky.
But I'm not putting my camera on because I'm like really tired and
That's fine. That's fine.
I look like shit too.
You look fine. But I don't know. You guys talked about. I missed the beginning, so before your friend was on. But did you all talk about what happened at the Capitol? And
just briefly, we didn't go into too much detail about it, but I'll give you my take on it, like a 10,000 foot view. I think that looking at the data, looking at the talk and the chatter on the dark web, looking at analyst comments, kind of observing from afar the whole situation, it was really interesting to see how the current president directed everybody to the Capitol that was at that rally.
And then took off.
And watched it from a tent as the Capitol Police opened the barriers and was waving people in. And then it got out of hand and things happened. It seems to me like there were two sides of it, but they were working together. And I don't think we'll probably ever know the truth about what happened, but I think the whole thing was staged. And, to think that Pence would go against the president and the president not know is kind of, I don't know, that doesn't ring true to me. And looking at some of the analyst comments and some of the chatter on the dark web, I think that, there's more to come. Don't get me wrong, but I think we're looking at a new type of government and maybe a new environment with more outside influence. When I say outside influence, I'm talking about, maybe some, not interference, but some influence with red countries. I think that's kind of where we're headed, especially with Biden.
Because I was thinking that maybe part of the people that were going in there were definitely foreign operatives. And
well, they've identified quite a few people that were in there that had been part of other movements like Black Lives Matters, like Antifa. They tried to identify one guy and say he was communist, but it was actually the tattoo on his hand was actually a gaming tattoo of some sort, which was really off. There was a couple people that were politicians' sons or judges' sons. Like I said, we'll never know the truth about what really happened unless an email server gets popped and we see that communication back and forth, which, I could assume that there's probably some groups that we may or may not have been associated with are probably looking at that right now.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else? You guys can unmute yourself.
Hi, Mike. I just wanted to go back to the exploit you tried running, and you were referring to packing the APK before. I've done some basic Android applications. What did you mean by packing? I didn't really understand that. So
when you create the APK, you have to put the payload in, right? That the APK has to have some sort of, transportation back to where you're at. So you have to embed that payload into the APK. Now, when I say pack, so there's several different applications like command line that you can use to create APKs that have malicious payloads, right? So Fat Rat, I know Patrick probably knows what Fat Rat is.
Right.
Yeah, and Shell Empire, stuff like that. Those tools are used to create like different APKs or EXEs or zips or whatever that have malicious payloads inside. And you can choose whatever payload you want. Like I use this because it gives me more control over the phone. But I could have set something up that made the phone call back on like a SSH tunnel or whatever. You can make it as complex as you want depending on what the operation is and what you want to achieve. But more importantly, so not only packing the APK, but actually doing the signing of the certificate and making it look legit. That's the most important part. So I would say look at how to sign APKs with Java. Look into learning about key stores and how those work. And maybe create a couple and test them on your own devices at home. Depending on how much you practice and what you learn about the architecture, the Android architecture, and the way that it verifies different packages, you'll have to play around with it and find out what works the best for you. But each person's different. Each hacker has their own routine. They have their own their own set of tools that they like to use that they're comfortable with, and just go from there and do a lot of research. And learn about Key Tool. If you learn about Key Tool, you'll learn a lot about what I do. Anybody else?
Hey Mike, how are you doing?
Good. How are you, Mike?
Oh, not too bad. Another exciting lockdown time again. It's more about the exploit. I'm afraid I'm completely green with this sort of stuff. I'm assuming that exploits like that you've placed on the phone, obviously probably invisible to the user of the phone and the like. And I would assume as well that accessible from anywhere.
Yeah, anywhere. So when you build the payload, you're going to hard code the IP address for that payload and the port that the receiving end is going to listen to. So the way that we used that type of communication or that type of exploitation previously was we would compromise a machine overseas or look at a shell server that we pay time on, or maybe like a AWS platform, and build the listener onto that platform or that shell device and hard code the APK to call back to the IP address. And at any one time, I could have 50 sessions going at once with different phones or different devices. So, does that answer your question?
Yes, it answers the question. Like I said, it's not something that I'm very knowledgeable about. My question is probably very basic in mannerism and things. But like everything else, it's something I'd probably have to read up a bit more about, I think. Yeah,
I mean, so the way that I look at hacking, right? So we have people who are uber great at web hacking, web app, that's their thing. And then we have other people who are great at creating malware. And then we have people who, focus on creating botnets. That's just my specialty is I want to intercept communications. And so looking at cell phones, there's so much data on cell phones because people live their lives on cell phones now.
Yeah, definitely.
The knowledge and the information you can steal from a cell phone, it's like a treasure trove. So I really focused on that. I wanted to see the best way to get into those phones. I wanted to try different avenues and different attacks and see what I could do to be stopped and what got past those defenses. And over a matter of time, it became really easy. And you got to think about it too. So the government does the same thing. They'll access cell phones and cell phone records and all the above. Some warrant less. But really it's the same methodology. And they probably use some of the same tools because they're effective. And, pick your poison, figure out where you're strongest at when it comes to exploitation, if that's your thing, and focus on it until you get it mastered. It may take a year, it may take 2 years, who knows? but mine is voice communications, communication intercept, and data exfiltration. So, and I know, Patrick, yours is what? Yours is a lot of application hacking and web stuff, right?
I mean, if I had to classify myself as something, I would say like a system hacker. It's about as rounded as you get. Only because I have an IT background, so I spent most of my career in IT while being a hacker, so living the double life, more or less. Couldn't wait to get off work, So I developed probably over the last 15 years different sets of skills. I've concentrated in each area, a little bit. Some things like you do, that I've never gotten into, like signal intelligence and stuff like that. So I never really touched too far into that area, but I'm pretty good with Wi-Fi hacking and radio technology as it is. But there's some things that I'd like to improve in myself. But and that's with being a computer hacker over 15 years.
Right.
So a lot of people ask, where did you get started? And I'm like, I just got started. Find something, that interests you, by playing is doing. Because I think one essential skill computer hackers have is I have the ability to just, if I'm after you when I was a computer hacker, I would spend literally a year of my life. Every chance I get, I would be pecking at your website, looking for a way in. And as soon as it was vulnerable, I was getting them. It's pretty much how hackers really think, and at an IT level, I applied obviously what I was doing in my fuck off time to my job, and it made me an effective IT manager, So it's been pretty interesting coming up in the community,
I think most of us had kind of a double life. We had that 9-to-5 job, and we'd go home and, maybe sometimes play around at work, looking at the infrastructure at work. I know that when I became a director of security, I would, test the network myself and just play with new tools and see how our network reacted to it. But all that was sanctioned. But when I was doing illegal stuff, I was actually taking data and exfiltrating it and finding ways to hide database structures and stuff like that. But really, it's all about jumping in and just putting your hands on it. I mean, the internet has all the information you need. It's just a matter of having that motivation and the patience and the time to sit down and really teach yourself a skill. And people ask me, how'd you learn what you do? And that's the toughest question anybody can ask me. Like, I hate that question at conferences and when I'm doing talks, because I don't know how to answer that. I mean, it's an like ability. It's like we were kind of like born with that ability, like that ability to think that way. And I can't teach that to anybody. It's not something I can say, okay, this is what I do to look at a system. My mind, I think, works a different way than most people's. And I think probably Patrick's
outside the box thinkers, because whereas most people who were like, for example, software developers, and they've never done anything in computer hacking, right? They write code and they can write more code and shit than I ever would imagine I can do, right? But when it comes to like actual physical hacking, system hacking, they're lost. I can tear apart their code in 10 minutes where it took them 2 years to write. It's because I'm not looking to rebuild their code. I'm just looking to screw it up. And once I do, how do I, use that to my advantage, with whatever I'm doing. So.
Yeah, it takes a level of creativity too. I think a creative mind is something that we all share.
Right.
Because, just
why not?
Exactly.
Try it. Why not?
I think I was asked a question about lockpicking last night, and they said, how do you do that? And my answer was, I just close my eyes and feel my way around. Like it's about envisioning what's going on the other end. And I think that pertains to network hacking and web app hacking and stuff like that, is you have to you really have to envision it in your head as to what's going on while you're doing the operation. So it's really, you have to have that creative ability.
And for example, a lot of what we've done, in like hacking and hacktivism, this structure around a lot of cyber war. There's a lot of stuff that went on in the community. People don't realize, 5 or more can gather for whatever reason, for whatever purpose, and make a bad day for somebody.
Right.
So there's always that, threat for whatever reason. So learning those tactics, learning how hackers think is very important on cybersecurity.
Yeah, and especially
you don't know how. Yeah.
Yeah, in the community too. I see, back in the day, I saw new people come into the community and they didn't know anything. They were complete, for lack of better terms, they were noobs, right? So they come in the community and they start asking questions. Can you teach me how to do this? Can you teach me how to do that? And back then, that was looked down upon. We wouldn't help those people. Because the trade craft that we had, it was our trade craft, is our secrets, right?
No GitHub.
yeah, there was no GitHub. You had to learn it by yourself. And so when people ask me, can you teach me to be like you? And it's how do I do that? I don't think I'm capable of cloning myself. I don't think I could take somebody and give them what I have completely. Because I didn't have that. I wouldn't know how to teach the way that I learned, other than just being curious and having that, I wouldn't say malicious mindset, but that dark streak that sometimes I danced the line, and back then I would go over the line to see where it would take me.
Yeah, our generation was a little bit different. I tried to do that, especially in hacktivism. I've been a computer hacker a long time, but when I got into hacktivism,
different story.
One thing that I always enjoyed though is through the community, I would always, get these kids now 5-6 years later that knew me back in the day, you inspired me, and to see them doing good and they're on the right side of cybersecurity, and they got their OSCP or something like that, and they just went complete the right direction, because they've seen it as a different mindset. I always told them you don't have to steal people's money to be a good computer hacker. You never had. And I respected the guys from Shadow Crew and all those old groups and stuff like that. I've been around the community a long time, but I think that you really don't have to really commit some severe computer crimes to be an actual elite hacker, somebody that's respected in the community.
Right.
You can do your thing and easily, gain respect.
And I think that's kind of the backbone of the Haunted Crew, is that a lot of us come from that background. We've committed some serious cyber crimes, but the way that we look at it now is, the world's a different place. We're different people, and we're going to make a difference the way that we know how.
Right.
And that's sharing information, kind of doing some tutorials to teach people, a little bit of what we know, and just being a sounding board for, people coming into the industry, and kind of give people the idea of, this is a route that this person took. Kevin took this route. Greg took this route, and give you a wide variety of successful people that we know and the different ways that they got there. And you can take that and kind of look at your own life, your own skills, and figure out where you want to be and how to get there. Because back then, we didn't have that. There was no such thing as, internet security when I first got in. That was something that we kind of trailblazed.
Hacking was more of rebellions, remember? It was our counterculture. We just did it to, we fucking smacked somebody up and laughed about it, and cool, and we would read the frack or, stuff like that back in the day, but
and the Hacker Manifesto and all that stuff.
Right. And that's about as far as we got. We never really had I remember when, there was some set of scripts. What was it called, Wax or something, and then that was like a precursor to like Backtrack. And I remember when that came out, and it was probably 2006, 2007, something like that. But I remember jumping on it. I'm like, sweet, I'm like, I have to write my own shit. Like, it was just convenient to have like all that set of tools, one spot, and not have to scavenge.
As time has gone by, though, we've seen that type of, tool set or whatever evolve into platforms for pen testers, and a lot of the stuff is automated. And what I found is that people will learn those tools and not really know what's going on behind the scenes, like not know how that tool really works and the exploits behind it. So when people come to me and say, hey, do you know how to use Rapid7, Nexpose or whatever, teach me how to do that. I'm like, no, I'm not going to teach you how to use a platform. You need to go out, look at the code, figure out how that exploit works. Because, you start firing exploits at random stuff, you don't really know what's going on. You can cause a lot of damage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true.
And they're not educating themselves on what really happens and
no Hail Mary.
Don't do that. Yeah, a lot of people don't learn the methodology and the mindset and how to approach a network or a system. And they're told, just plug this in and hit this button. And the whole AI thing and the whole automation, I think, does the whole industry a really bad disservice, because the more automation that gets involved with pen testing, the less the humans involved. And really, it's the human mind and creativity that makes a pen test successful. It's not the tool. It's the knowledge of the tool and the creativity to use that tool in various complex situations. Johnny says, isn't it curiosity and passion that drives one forward? What is focused on is individual. Some dig deep, others are content with less, e.g. your explanation with tools versus detail. Yeah, so the whole, definition behind what is a hacker, I think in the manifesto, the hacker manifesto, they mentioned something about hacking is not a physical crime or a malicious crime. It's a crime of curiosity, which it is. So a lot of us have been caught up in, let's say, a cyber crime that was strictly spurred off of being curious. And a lot of us, our natural background or the way we are as a person is curious. I've been curious since I was a kid, digging into. So I'll tell you a little story about curiosity that got me into a lot of trouble that has nothing to do with hacking or computers, but shows that curiosity, right? So when I was a toddler, my grandmother had a tear gas gun in her closet. And I was always told to stay out of the closets. Well, you tell me to stay out of the closet, I'm going to plunder. I'm going to take my opportunity. I'm an opportunist. I'm going to wait until that closet's open. I'm getting in it. So I found this tear gas gun. I think I was 3 maybe. And I pick up this tear gas gun and I shoot myself in the face with it. Because obviously I didn't know what it was, but I knew you had to press something. And nearly blinded me. And so that same curiosity never stopped. You would think that when, a kid puts his hand on a stove and says, oh, that's hot, he's not going to walk up to something else that looks just like it and do the same. But I always wanted to test everything around me, whether it be a radio, a TV, a VCR, a laptop. I remember destroying my mom's first laptop that she brought home with a virus I had written. So it's all about curiosity. And I don't try to stifle people's curiosity. I just try to get them to contain it. And when I talk to kids, I tell them that once you do have that ability to do the things that we do, it's like a superhero. And they can equate to that because they look up to that type of stuff and they're interested in it. And I tell them, with great power comes great responsibility. So you really have to contain yourself and learn how to, put yourself in check. And that's something that I didn't learn probably when I should. Yeah.
There's some things that definitely have to be said, and it's something that, I've been trying to, speak out against. It's like, I've been a computer hacker a long time, IT professional and everything. I've never seen people slam in hospitals and, you know what I mean? Like, you ever see that, Mike? I've never seen that in my life, because no matter how skilled a computer hacker is, he if he has that type of mindset and thinks like in degree that I think we all think like, he's not going to do nothing like that and put people's lives in jeopardy for a buck.
No.
That's definitely where it's more nation state, because being under orders and under morals are two different things.
Right.
They don't equate.
Right.
You're being told what to do. Whereas a normal computer hacker like me, it's like, I'm not going to nail some hospital with ransomware. Like, what's the matter with you? Like it's just incredible what's going on. I never thought I'd see today,
Yeah, I'm the same way. Like, I don't see why someone would attack like a retirement center or, insurance companies, other than to make a buck. But that's not who we are.
But is that not just criminal intent? The ones that are just after the money.
Well, it's not just criminal intent, right? So a lot of organized crime that, especially right now during the pandemic, a lot of those organized crime groups that operate on the streets had to move to another way to make money because they're not allowed on the streets. So they went to the cyber realm. So a lot of these people you see running ransomware or running phishing schemes, those are your organized crime groups that are trying to capitalize on a bad situation.
Carters have, you have a whole systematic level of steps, so you got the hackers, we hack into the database. You got mules, you got cash cows, there's several different, entities involved with it now. It isn't just somebody, hacking and dumping some cards and making some money off of it like they did back in the day. It's really thoroughly organized. Nation states pretty much primarily take part in it. For example, like North Korea, that as well, Mike. Like, that's probably like a good portion of their budget. Is cyber crime, right?
Yeah. And like China, like when sanctions get put on countries, all of a sudden you see like cryptocurrency, gets around because that's the only way that they can not be traced financially, So the things that you see like on TV and the cases that are exposed publicly, there's a reason for it, and a lot of it is making a example out of people. But you rarely hear about hackers stepping in to help. But it does happen. It happens quite a bit. A hacker helping law enforcement identify a person of interest. That does happen a lot. But we're always looked at as the evil people or the boogeyman.
I've seen people, what was it, the Steubenville? You know what I mean? It's a prime example of somebody, getting information that the cops didn't even have themselves. And he goes to jail longer than the people that committed that crime. I was like, that blew my mind. I remember that. I was like, wow.
Well, and look at some of the stuff that we did with Anonymous, like taking down ISIS profiles, putting together whole case files of thousands of pedophiles and handing them over to law enforcement. But they were considering that a crime. We were being looked at as like hindering investigations. And I'm like, no, we didn't hinder anything. We finished your investigation. Like, the data's here. You don't even have to worry about investigation.
Back in the day, the feds told me all I needed to know, like what Aaron Swartz and stuff like that. Like, I was just like, wow, like 30 years for that. Like, I'm like, it's really hard to rationalize. I would say that United Kingdom, other European countries, they have a little bit better of policy driven laws governing like cyber crimes, especially if it's around hacktivism or something like that. Because, I like to think of that as, like we always explain through the documentaries, like, it's no bit different than me getting 40 of my friends and preventing you from getting on the bus.
Exactly.
Like, we're just trying to, get our message across and move along,
Yeah. And I talked to the first big crowd that I talked to in Europe. One of the questions was, as far as DDoS, do you think that is illegal. And I'm like, you know what? If you look back to the 60s and 70s, right, and they had the protests of Vietnam, and people would have sit-ins, and it would sit in front of doors to buildings and keep people from accessing those buildings. You don't see them getting like 20, 25 years in prison for that. You see them probably going for 24 hours maybe. So, I mean, the cyber laws are very immature. I think it's going to take a lot to actually bring those to the forefront and change them.
That's a good point. Like there should be, you know, different statutes that govern, you know, financial crimes, hacktivism, you know, and cyber stalking, and there's other issues out there, you know, that I've seen that got brought to my attention, probably near the end of my little hacktivism reign, but you know, like some cyber crimes that, you know, I never really thought took place until, you know, you meet people that have those experiences, and you're kind of like, shit, you know, like, you know, what I knew and my type of people would never do something like that, but other people learn the shit I know to do that. And it just, you know, so I feel like it taints what computer hackers really are, you know, which are people who, in a nutshell, love technology. It's really what it is. You know?
Yeah, and curiosity and stuff. Okay, so next weekend, we'll continue this conversation with me, Patrick, and with Ghost Exodus, and with Alberto, hopefully. So same time next weekend, we have a store now, the Teespring store with all the Haunted Hacker merchandise. We have that. We have the Discord server. We also have a Twitter account with all that information on it. So everybody's welcome on the Discord. But the same rules apply as a podcast. You know, if you start, you know, causing trouble, whatever, you get hit with the ban hammer, and we won't let you back. So be kind and courteous, and not talk a bunch of noise. So this podcast is like really growing quite a bit. Like, I'm really surprised, and, you know, I'm excited about the future of where this is going. And like I said, TechStrong TV has offered to host this podcast on their platform and help promote it, which will give us a lot more exposure. But I really like where it's going. I really appreciate everybody tuning in every weekend. I see multiple people tuning in every weekend, which I think is really cool. It's dedication to learn more about the industry. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and end the podcast. And if you guys want to move over to the Discord, feel free to. I myself am going to grab something to eat and call it a night. So I will see you guys later. Thanks, Patrick.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
All right, guys, welcome back. Next up, we have the monthly installment of The Lab from Gitlab. Brendan O'Leary gives us the lowdown on the monthly Gitlab updates. So let's give it a listen.
Hello, friends, and welcome to The Lab, a monthly show where we look at all of the latest and greatest developments in software development, DevOps, and the cloud. I'm your host, Brendan O'Leary, and I'm coming today from another gorgeous sunny day in Annapolis, Maryland, on the East Coast of the United States. Today, I've just got a few things I want to talk about with you. First, I want to review the last two GitLab releases, GitLab 13.7 and GitLab 13.8, that came out on December 22nd and January 22nd, respectively. Go through some features that I think are really key features that help make both of those the best release ever. Then I want to talk about the upcoming year, 2021. We're already a little bit into it, but let's talk about, what I think is coming for us in the world of development and DevOps in 2021. And then we'll wrap it up, and I'll see you in the next one. But first, in this episode of the lab, I'd like to talk about GitLab 13.7. So this was released on December 22nd. As you may remember, GitLab makes a release on every 22nd, and that's pretty much happened for the last, I think, 5 or 6 years. So hundreds of releases. We can set your calendar to that, as I say. So maybe not set your watch, but you can definitely set your calendar to a release on the 22nd. And in 13.7, some of my favorite features, probably the easiestly my favorite one, is the concept of reviewers for merge requests. So those of you that have been using GitLab for a while will know that a merge request, can have assignees. And oftentimes what you'll have is a lot of back and forth of assigning and reassigning that merge request, depending on who's supposed to be looking at it when. And while you can still do that, it's nice to now have a separate field specifically for reviewers. So we can say, these are the folks who are going to review this merge request. That way, if there's other additional sign-off or additional signees, or you want to keep yourself assigned to your merge request so that it's still in your queue before it's reviewed and merged, you can do that. It makes it a lot easier to stay organized. Another great feature is the ability to automatically roll back a deployment in case of failure. So this, based on alerts that can happen in your environment after GitLab automatically deploys the next version of your application, it can decide to smartly roll back if there's a peak in errors or some other sort of alert. GitLab can roll back to the previous version automatically without human intervention. And then, of course, it sends you notification of the alert and lets you know that deployment failed. But this is really valuable for folks trying to embrace, continuous delivery to production and progressive delivery of new features to production, so that you can do that with the confidence that you're not going to break something during that deploy. And if you do, well, GitLab will roll back for you automatically. Also on the deployment side, you can now see the deployment status for each environment on the environments page. So you can easily identify, where a deployment is and what actions you need to take, such as, maybe stopping or manually rolling back a deployment or manually pushing forward a deployment to the next environment. You can now visualize all that directly on the environments page. Another set of features came in 13.7 for package management and dependency management that we're really excited about. As you know, there's been some big changes around Docker Hub and pricing and how dependencies are managed there. And so we're really excited to bring things like dependency proxy into GitLab to make it easier for not only you to, reduce your reliance on outside tools, but also manage more directly and more specifically your software supply chain. That's really a critical point of security that is often underestimated. We've seen a number of recent attacks focused on specifically software supply chain. And so we're hoping that these dependency and package management tools can help teams combat some of those attacks. You can also quickly clone on the issue side an issue with a quick action. So I love this. A lot of times I have an issue that's well written or organized the way I want, and I have kind of a next iteration of that issue or another idea that's similar and I want to organize it the same way. And, I might open a new issue and copy and paste and do all of that. Well, now if I'm sitting on the issue that I want to clone, I can just in a comment type /clone and hit enter, and GitLab will automatically clone that to a new issue for me. So it's really valuable for when teams are, making a lot of issues to understand what's going on and what we want to do next. And then finally in 13.7, really excited to announce that the GitLab runner is now available and generally available for Red Hat OpenShift. And so we're really excited to see all of the OpenShift users be able to use the GitLab runner in a generally available way with their OpenShift deployments, and how that's going to enable more folks to leverage GitLab CI/CD for their workloads. I'm really excited about that. And of course, there's a lot more features besides those few that I just named in 13.7. If you just Google GitLab 13.7, you'll find the blog post. There's a blog post every 22nd that comes out with all of the features that are released, detailed links to the documentation for each of these features. You can even link into the issue and merge requests that added those features into GitLab to begin with, directly from that blog post. And oftentimes our product managers will put in images or videos to kind of help explain them even more. So if you have any questions about these features or any of the features that I didn't mention, be sure to check that post out. And on the 22nd of January, GitLab 13.8 came out. Same idea. You can read the blog post for all of the hundreds of features that were added, all the features that got added from our community members, right? We have over 100 to 200 additions from the community, from engineers that don't work for GitLab, but are in our open source community and are adding features and fixes to GitLab constantly every month. But in reviewing 13.8, a couple of features really stood out to me. First, this is something I'm really excited for. I've been wanting it for a long time, and it makes 13.8 easily the best release GitLab has ever done. And that is this new graphical user interface, both for editing and viewing the pipelines that you create. So I'm really excited for this. It's something that I think is going to really help people both getting started with GitLab CI and managing really complex CI pipelines that they've built over time. You can visually edit and see the changes to the pipeline as you're editing them, or view the pipeline as a visual output of your CI file and trace all of the different dependencies that exist in your pipeline really easy and visually. I'm a big visual learner, and as much as I love the GitLab CI YAML and having that all kind of as code, and I think that's still really important, right? We want to track changes to that CI pipeline, CI/CD pipeline, just like we would track changes to any other piece of the software that we're changing. And that's still all true, right? It's still defined as code in that GitLab CI YAML. But the ability to then visualize that output as I'm making those changes is just huge. I'm really excited about that. Another really critical feature, those who've followed me for a long time have heard me talk a lot about the Dora Metrics, right? These are the metrics from the DevOps research group that really have done years and years of research on what are the metrics that teams should measure that most highly correlate to their success, both in delivering better software faster and in overall business success. And the team at Dora has spent years pouring through research and refining these metrics. And I'm really excited that the deployment frequency charts in CI/CD analytics now allows you to report on those metrics directly from in GitLab, right? And so the benefit of having a single platform for your entire DevOps lifecycle gives you the ability to easily collect and view these metrics, which then correlate directly to your team's success. So for your team, you can measure yourself against, the Dora report from 2020 that shows you, what the highest performing teams are doing in terms of each of those metrics. But for large enterprises, you can also measure teams against each other and see, what's working, what's not, how can we improve everyone and kind of level up everyone's embrace of DevOps across the organization. It gives you a really simple metric to compare against, which I think is super valuable. There's also a lot of UX improvements to take, some of those tasks that can be tedious in GitLab and make them really simple and easy to do, right? We've got a huge focus this year, if you read our product direction page, on UX and the usability and of the software. And so I'm really excited to see a lot of changes getting into 13.8, seeing us realize that focus that we've seen from the product and our UX teams in 13.8. One seemingly minor UX thing, but that I just love is, there's been this ability to make multi-line comments on a merge request for some time in GitLab. And the way you would do that is you'd start on one line and then you'd say, hey, how many lines backwards or forwards does this comment apply to? But now in the GitLab UI, you can just click to comment on one line and drag it to say, this is the block of code that this comment is relative to. So that's seemingly very simple, but is going to be a huge workflow improvement for those folks that are using merge requests to review code and want to, talk about more than just one line at a time. To just quickly drag and highlight those things is going to be really helpful. Another thing that I do for myself all the time when I'm doing merge requests is I'd like to be able to, rebase those merge requests to the main branch of my repository before merging, right? So some folks might do that with a merge train where you say, before we merge, we're gonna run a certain set of tests against the merge result. What would that merge result be? But sometimes it's just nice to know, hey, is there a conflict? Is there gonna be something that I want to consider that's changed in the time since I started this merge request? For me, a lot of times it's our GitLab handbook, right? We have that all in open source and in a Git repository. And because of that, and with 1,300 folks at GitLab, it's changing a lot, right? There's hundreds of merge requests a day to that. And so it's really helpful to rebase quickly before, sending something that's as ready to merge. And now, and what I used to do for that is I do it in my CLI, right? I love the Git CLI and I know it pretty well. And I, fetch origin and do the rebase there. But now I can do it from a quick action within the GitLab UI. So when I'm in a merge request, I can just say /rebase in the comment and hit enter, and GitLab will automatically rebase that branch to the branch that's targeted by the merge request. And then, of course, if there's conflicts, you can resolve those within the UI. But it's just a really seemingly small feature that I think is going to be a huge quality of life improvement for folks who are, working in a project that might have a very, high rate of code changes. I think it's going to be really helpful. And like I said, that's not it. If you want to Google GitLab 13.8, you'll find the blog post with all of the great new features and how to use them. Documentation. So take a look at those for sure. So next, I want to talk about the year ahead of us, 2021. Obviously, 2020 was challenging for a lot of us in a lot of different ways. And, we're not out of the woods yet with many of those challenges. And I think they'll continue into 2021. But, the reality is a lot of us are working and still trying to figure out, hey, how are we going to, how are our jobs going to change? How are we going to change what we're doing with each other in 2021? And something I've been thinking about there is how vital, specifically CI/CD, of all of the DevOps things that we talk about, I think specifically CI/CD is going to be very vital for folks in developer recruitment and retention in 2021. I talked about this actually on the 21st of January at Predict 2021, which was a great session and conference put on by MediaOps. And I did a whole kind of walk through why I think CI/CD is one of the most important things for thinking about recruiting and retaining top engineering talent. But just generally, I think the key is that as more organizations move to working remotely, kind of indefinitely, right? We're going to be in this stage either for an unknown period of time or for forever. And more initiatives are moved virtual. The demand for developer services is just going to continue to grow, right? It's another step change in that demand that we've seen increasing over the past 10, 20 years. And it's key for organizations to adopt continuous integration and delivery in order to recruit and retain that top developer talent. CI/CD allows you to be scalable, produce faster results, optimize for delivery of value to customers, and cause less frustration and allow your developers more time to focus on what they want to do, which is build value for your customers. Software delivery excellence as a whole is going to continue to be the competitive differentiator in all industries and across all verticals. And CI/CD, especially continuous delivery, is going to become the norm, not the exception. Businesses are going to have to strive to further differentiate themselves from their competitors. So that's where we see methodologies like progressive delivery, canary deployments, the use of feature flags in production systems those things are ushering in a new era of bringing developers even closer to production than they've ever been before. And as teams embrace these changes and integrate security practices directly into them, those systems are going to see huge benefits and just decrease cycle time and their ability to respond to change in the market really quickly. And that's going to widen this gap between teams with an integrated DevOps platform and those that are stuck on legacy tools that provide only CI or only CD or only security capabilities without having integrated security and deployment flexibility and understanding how you're impacting the value stream. New innovators are going to drive those top tiers of competitors in every industry forward. And enterprises, have had this focus. For years, they've been focused on the DevOps platform. And we've seen this consolidation in the DevOps tool space as vendors and customers alike strive to kind of bring down cycle times while also increasing the security and dependability of software deployments. And in this all-digital world, developers will have a bigger seat at the table. Rapid technology advancements, sweeping changes in business priorities, and this insatiable demand for software have all collided, meaning that the developer's role will continue to evolve and have a larger and larger seat at the table. Gitlab's latest survey, we call it our Devsecops Survey, found that developers are already seeing this change. This was just in 2020, and reporting on their new ops and security responsibilities while also being responsible for releasing software at an ever faster rate. And in 2021, software will be seen as the critical measure of business success, and we'll continue to see developers become embedded in business teams rather than in a technology team. And so I'm going to be watching that. Really interested in your thoughts on those predictions, and would love to hear more from you. Thank you so much for joining me for the lab today. I'm really excited for this opportunity and want to thank MediaOps and Alan Schimmel in particular for the opportunity to talk to you all today. If you have any questions or comments about the show or about all those predictions I just made for 2021, whether they're good, bad, ugly, indifferent, I'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear from you at the show. You can reach me on Twitter at O'Leary Crew. That's OLEARYCREW. Or you can reach the team at hi@labwork.dev. That's hi@labwork.dev. Thanks for joining us, and I'll see you next month in the lab. Stay safe.
All right, welcome back. In our Something Old segment now, we have a recent DevOps experience conversation or discussion from Maya Berlerner, who talks about scaling bottoms-up DevOps initiatives and how organizations should choose their tools wisely. So let's give it a listen.
My name is Maya, and I'm Chief Technology Officer at Quali. Quali specializes in solutions for infrastructure automation at scale, and I've been working in infrastructure and application automation for about 13 years. And it's a very exciting time to be in DevOps. 10 years ago, I couldn't really explain to any of my friends what it was exactly I was doing for work, and I think we settled on deep tech. But today my grandma knows that it's really good to invest in DevOps tools. So I'm extremely excited at everything that we've been able to achieve as an industry. And we've come a long way, but we still have ways to go. And one of the biggest problems that I see today is that of turning small DevOps into big DevOps, especially in larger companies. Many companies still look at DevOps as a science experiment, usually with one application team, usually an internal application, microservices from day one, usually cloud native, containerized, Kubernetes, and usually the best developers or most experienced developers getting full autonomy and being told, go learn what you need to learn, go do what you need to do, and, make me DevOps. So whether they are successful or not, it gives us very little information or understanding on what is going to happen next. And how do we take whatever this team has been doing and turn it into a viable strategy for DevOps that can actually succeed across the organization. And a lot of this originates from DevOps being more than just a bunch of practices. DevOps is about a behavior change that drives culture change. And this is something that we imagine happening bottom up. It's not some executive buying IBM and giving it to everyone and we all do DevOps. When we talk about DevOps, we sometimes imagine the community taking over and eliminating silos and making it possible to finally build things fast. So this bottom-up DevOps approach really starts from solving a small problem, automating a manual inefficiency or eliminating toil. And in my field, for example, usually starts from the provisioning and deployment tasks that just take too long. So setting up a dev or test environment takes me an hour, too long. I write automation, I make it a minute. Deploying to production, manual, I write an automation script or use an automation tool and I make it happen at the call of an API. So the person that solves the problem is the person who encountered the problem and it's the person who has skills to solve it. And in other words, it's a developer. And the way that the problem is usually solved is that we take some open source tool or some free tool and we use it to solve the problem so that we don't have to waste time looking for someone that would pay for it. And we don't want to deal with approval flows. And we certainly don't want to start building business cases. We want to just go ahead and solve the problem. So since so many people are trying to do the same thing at the same time, we get a community that does similar things and solves similar problems. So this creates a culture. And the result is that some really brilliant things are being developed. But the result is also that we're getting new silos and we get these islands of automation that are very difficult to bridge between application teams or even sometimes within application teams, really depending on the size of the team and the company. So when we try to scale this bottom-up approach, we have to deal with a lot of separate initiatives. The phrase free as in free puppy, that always makes me somehow laugh. It often comes up. And what started with free or open source tools, just like a puppy, we realized that we have to continue taking care of it and we need to continue maintaining it and supporting it even as it grows. And we need to connect all these tools that we got. We need to somehow integrate between them. And we need to either do it on our own or develop plugins or find plugins in the community and really hope that they work. And then time goes by and we realize that we need to keep upgrading. And we need to keep validating the versions of all these free tools. And we need to start worrying about interoperability. And the biggest pain that I hear from DevOps teams these days is that they are absolutely swamped and all the time. So you want to get something on the backlog, talk to me next year, maybe. And another frustration that I hear from developers is that they are expected to do this and they feel that, they are wasting their very expensive time on learning things and on doing things that feel a lot like reinventing the wheel. Another effect of this that we encounter is that it creates silos between people who can code and people who cannot code. An example I see in infrastructure automation all the time is that those who have coding skills can use cloud directly and they can automate it on their own. And I'm ignoring for a second the fact that just because they can automate it doesn't mean that they're cost or security or compliance experts. So we often get and end up with cloud automation induced overspend and exposed S3 buckets. That's a different problem. I'm putting that aside. But what about all those people who cannot code at all, right? What about product owners and sometimes experts with PhDs that cannot code, shamefully, but they get stuck with whatever others will give them. And what happens is that the exact same processes and the exact same automation is being written time after time by and for different people with different skill levels. And I think as an automation person that automation that you cannot reuse is really the worst kind of automation. So how do we scale DevOps? And how do we take all these small initiatives and make something big out of them? The solution that I see emerging is the use of platforms. And I take as an example the Dora's State of the DevOps report from 2019. They talk about the benefits of creating a platform that makes it easy for teams to get fast feedback and can be a force multiplier when used across several teams. They talk about continuous integration. And a very similar approach, but from the ops direction, is described in Google's Site Reliability Engineering, How Google Runs Production Systems. Very good book. Chapter 32, after you finish reading everything you need to know about what is SRE and how to do it, they start talking about how to scale it. And they talk about the evolution of the SRE engagement model in Google. And they talk about a platform of SRE validated infrastructure as a way to focus developers on innovating in the application layer. And so one of the most promising approaches to scaling DevOps is platform ops. So what is platform ops? In platform ops, we take a dedicated team, and this team maintains a self-service platform for the application teams that has all the building blocks that they need for their value stream delivery. So in a way, platform ops helps to balance agility with control. And it gives enough freedom for developers to build and to operate applications at speed on their own and to be responsible for all the aspects of the application's operations, but without maintaining their own infrastructure and without maintaining their operations tooling. And the application teams remain responsible to their applications, but they are being serviced by an external team. So the platform ops team is a team that combines different types of expertise. So it would have different people on it with different specialties and cloud architects so that we can provide a team with things like value stream delivery and CI/CD, tools like Jenkins and like Circle CI and like Azure DevOps, right? And infrastructure as code and cloud automation building blocks, artifact repository tools, observability, emergency response, mechanisms for controlling cloud costs and for doing capacity management and for optimizing infrastructure, and mechanisms for making sure infrastructure and applications are secure and are compliant, depending on what industry we're in. And of course, everything that has to do with access and cloud access and secret management. And finally, also analytics and metrics, things like the Dora Metrics that can help teams understand their level of maturity and continuously improve that. So the benefits of platform ops are really clear. Yes, we are paying a price that not everyone gets to decide on everything on their own, but we are eliminating the need for our application teams to be experts on everything, from doing their work and developing to cloud and to networking and to monitoring and to security and every other skill that some of us are expecting developers to have today, and essentially makes it very, very hard to hire. We also have less technical debt, and we potentially provide a much better developer experience and less context switching for our developers so that they can focus on whatever it is that we're developing as a company and is our core business. And maybe most importantly, we're building something that can work for a bigger company. So it's not just for one team. It's something that can actually scale. Platform ops, not centralized IT. It's very different from centralized IT because platform ops is not responsible for operating the application and the infrastructure. Instead, it is responsible for empowering the application teams to do it themselves without reinventing the wheel. And this means they're actually building a product where the application teams are actually the customers. And the platform teams is measured they are measured not on how much they can save on cloud expense, on how secure the applications are, but rather on how fast they can onboard a new application team and how much they improve the developer's experience. So, main takeaway from this, doing DevOps requires DevOps platforms, and these platforms are not the core business for most companies. So the way to scale them is to make sure that developers aren't burdened with building them. And if you still need some level of flexibility, then platform ops is a really great way to achieve that. If you want to talk about platform ops, I'm always happy to connect. Thank you everyone for joining this session today, and goodbye.
Hiring great DevOps and cyber talent is a huge challenge for technical teams. Cloud transformation is driving demand higher. You've tried doing it yourself. Job boards, LinkedIn, didn't work. Recruiters are an option, but who do you trust and not waste your time and money? Recruit Ops is the new way to source engineering talent. From Media Ops, the people behind DevOps.com, Security Boulevard, Container Journal, and more. We sit right in the middle of the hottest positions in Dev, Sec, and Ops, and the brightest minds in the field. If you're looking for a great position or the talent to fill it, we can help you. Trust us, risk-free.
Hey everybody, happy Thursday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon with the Thursday edition of the headlines. First up on DevOps.com, we have an article that looks at DevSecOps and some best practices for organizations that want to shift from a DevOps model. It's a pretty comprehensive look at what DevSecOps is and some of the barriers for adoption that organizations need to consider, as well as some of the best ways to ease into DevSecOps. The best advice? Start small and start early. Integrate new processes, techniques, and tools slowly to avoid downtime and high costs. Determine what your company's success factors are and measure both the success and the ROI. Tools and automation are essential elements to understanding the true value DevSecOps brings to your organization. But when you factor in the benefits of having a secure application and a high-quality user experience, the value of DevSecOps becomes very clear. Speaking of DevSecOps, we also have the second in a series of articles focusing on tools related to DevSecOps implementation. Don McVitie, who is both a regular contributor to DevOps.com and an analyst at Accelerated Strategies Group, has been analyzing the DevSecOps space for a while now and recently did a series of articles on the DevSec side of DevSecOps. Now he's looking at the ops part. This article takes a look at security information and event management, otherwise known as SIEM. SIEM is best characterized as a data aggregation platform with limited intelligence to aid in filtering of irrelevant events. So it basically filters out the worst noise and elevates the important messages. It can be a godsend to system administrators who have to contend with determining which alerts are serious and which are just noise. And now, with the addition of artificial intelligence in SIEM systems, security and operations personnel now have the ability to connect the dots on events that analysts or the system itself might have filtered out to find patterns that indicate intrusions. In security, SIEM is huge, and it's becoming equally important in DevSecOps. So if you're not well versed in SIEM and want to learn more, this article is definitely worth checking out. All right, over on Container Journal, we have big news from JFrog and Docker Inc., which both announced they are working toward tightening integration between their respective offerings to reduce DevOps friction and to make software development more efficient. Under the terms of the alliance, application components residing in Docker Hub, including Docker official images and content from Docker verified publishers, can be automatically mirrored within the JFrog Artifact software package management platform. The agreement also provides dedicated support mechanisms for mutual customers. JFrog CEO Shlomi Ben-Haim says both companies are committed to making software development more efficient across the entire supply chain, and to do so, the companies will further automate their processes. This partnership will continue to expand as part of an overall effort to streamline DevOps processes and provide a better developer experience. And Red Hat has added data protection capabilities to its OpenShift container storage software. Version 4.6 enables IT teams to take point-in-time snapshots of persistent data volumes and includes the ability to clone those volumes. IBM, Twilio, and Kasten have already certified support for the latest release of Red Hat OpenShift container storage in their respective backup and recovery platforms. The company is also making available an open API through which providers of data protection platforms will be able to more easily associate data running in a specific Kubernetes pod with a namespace. Red Hat's goal is to extend Kubernetes in a way that provides IT teams with a consistent approach to managing data protection across Kubernetes clusters, regardless of what underlying storage platform is employed. Over on Security Boulevard, regular contributor Sue Peremba takes a look at the need for greater cloud security in the era of remote work. She takes a look at a new cloud security study from Metrics, which found that more than half of organizations that store data in the cloud reported security incidents in 2020. Yikes. And nearly 2/3 of those organizations plan to remove sensitive data from the cloud. That's compared to less than half the year before. Obviously, this could end up reversing the business continuity companies relied on when they made the move from on-site to remote work. The answer to a more secure cloud is multifold, including understand where an organization's security risks in the cloud are, and even paying closer attention to the less secure elements in their supply network. It's an interesting article and very relevant in the work-from-home era. And we take a look at why enterprises need to take ransomware attacks seriously. Seriously. We're well past the days of it might happen, it might not. Thanks to many factors, not the least of which are the security issues surrounding the shift to remote work during COVID-19. Enterprises, and really all companies, need to prepare for the eventuality of a ransomware attack. We all know that ransomware attacks can be expensive and potentially devastating, and that's why organizations need to do what they can now to protect themselves before the attack occurs. This article lays out some of the steps organizations can take to protect themselves from ransomware, including investing in technology that helps them take a more proactive stance of protection before an attack occurs, rather than a reactive stance of rebuilding later on after the attack has happened. All right, that's all I have for today's webinar. Sorry, not the webinars, the headlines. Check back with me on Monday when I'll have a fresh new batch for you. Until then, have a great day and please stay safe.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everybody, welcome back to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with Dan Conrad, who is the field strategist at One Identity. Dan, thanks so much for chatting with me today. Again, good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you again, Charlene.
Awesome. So let's talk about a report that you guys put out, I think maybe in November or December, I don't know, all the months just kind of bleed together now. Right. But you guys were taking a look at the challenges that organizations are facing with Microsoft Active Directory and in adopting Azure Microsoft Active Directory. So really, really interested, especially, when we're talking about the identity and access aspect of, organizations and just their cybersecurity efforts and just using cloud services in general, especially, right. In the pandemic and everybody's shifted to the cloud. What did you guys see? What did you guys find out what did you determine for the report?
Well, there's obviously challenges, right? Any new project is going to bring challenges in. A lot of it was around the shift, not from a user perspective, it should be pretty good. They should have a good user experience, maybe a better user experience. But the IT professionals, bringing in another system to manage that now I need to go put my fingers on something else. Every time I do this, I need to now do X, Y, and Z. And that was kind of a big thing. And making sure that's done consistently was sort of a problem that we see.
So the pandemic, did that kind of make things easier for folks or more difficult? Especially, it seemed like there were so many organizations that were shifting so quickly. They, were like stopping on a dime and shifting their efforts to the cloud or to technologies that they perceived would actually kind of help their organizations or their employees be more productive. But, did they inadvertently end up adding another level of complexity in their IT operations?
Well, complexity would be, probably one of their concerns. The concern that I would have is, a lot of the things that they did to enable users were done very quickly. Knee-jerk reaction. Now all my users need to work remotely from wherever in the world. So they embraced cloud services, which was a logical step. A lot of the things that they did were probably on their roadmap anyway, but they were just going to think more about it and do things more methodically and examine each step. What we're really hoping is that the things that they did were done securely and done the right way. Don't open up an Azure AD account with, leaving default credentials in place or whatever your cloud platform that you migrated to. A lot of those things that go along with that around securing the cloud platforms are a concern that I have. And I hope that people are looking back at how they implemented these things that enabled their users and making sure that all the right blocks were checked along the way.
So what were some of the findings in the report that really surprised you?
Well, we weren't really surprised about, the numbers like 37% of IT professionals find rapid change, the most challenging impact of COVID-19. Rapid change is always a challenge, especially if it's, unpredicted. So you can do projects fast if you plan to do them fast, but nobody really planned for this. And then, the concept that, the provisioning and deprovisioning was a big piece. So when they, talk about 48% reported that provisioning and deprovisioning of Azure AD was a challenge. Yes, it is a challenge. It's different. It is that extra step. And that's one of the things that we focus on at One Identity is making those kind of steps automated so that when you do it right once, it can be repeated, repeatable processes. If you can whiteboard it and figure out how you want to do it, then it's nice to be able to do that repeated in the same way. And then you talk about, deprovisioning. Deprovisioning has always been a big challenge in the identity and access management space. Not just giving the right people the right access at the right time for the right reasons, but, when they need to have that removed, that's always, nice. It's not great to look back in your company directory and find somebody that left 3 years ago and still has, an account that's active, but we want to make sure that that's all lined up with your company priorities and your security policies as well.
So your report really focused on Microsoft Active Directory and Azure. But do you see this as kind of a problem across different technologies? I mean, no matter what, whether it's Microsoft or any other like SaaS-based application, cloud-based application, do you think that organizations kind of, because they did have to shift so quickly that maybe they didn't lock down their systems as much as they could have, or that they implemented a technology that they're not fully familiar with, and so there've been some security implications as the result of that?
Definitely. When you're talking about how did you enable the employees, did you breach security protocols like to give them access to things? Did you open ports on firewalls that you normally wouldn't open? There's ways to do things securely. Did you follow best practices? If you're talking about an employee that was sent home and you were 100% non-cloud ready, then you need to find ways to give people access into your data center. How did you do that? Did you give everybody VPNs? Did you teach them the vulnerabilities that go along with that? A lot of it's user education, but at the same time, you need to configure things correctly as well. Big concerns there.
So what about from the user perspective? Do you think that organizations did, obviously at the beginning, everybody was scrambling, and, who can fault an organization for inadvertently introducing security, vulnerabilities into their networks? There's a lot of cleanup work that has to happen now, and a lot of organizations recognize that. But I wonder if as much attention has been paid to kind of cleaning up things on the employee end as well, making sure that education does happen, even though we are 9 months from the start of the pandemic. I would imagine that there's still a healthy amount of issues that are out there that have been kind of created by employees working from home that organizations haven't really addressed from within their employee ranks.
Well, I'm always a big fan of user education and the right types of user education. There's a fine line between bombarding them with information that they're not going to read or understand and teaching them the right practices. That's one thing that when I saw this mass change, I think most of us have been in situations where I've worked remotely for 15 years. So I didn't, I just assumed everybody could do this, and I was dead wrong. I saw some companies that when they sent all their users home, they didn't have laptops to give them. So they sent out a company email. I don't know how the employees got it, but they said, schedule a time, come back to the office, pick up your desktop, take it home, call the help desk, and we'll teach you how to hook it up to your home network. Introducing a lot of vulnerabilities there that you're not really prepared for. And I hope that we're catching up to that and teaching employees how to work remotely, because things are different. If you're sitting in a coffee shop on an unsecured Wi-Fi working on intellectual property within the company, or if you're, sitting at home and you VPN'd in, there's different ways to behave and different things to do. And people need to start to understand that. And I think they really are. We're getting used to complex passwords and multi-factor authentication. I'm to the point where I appreciate difficult things to authenticate to. And I hope most people will, stop looking at the way they work as an inconvenience and realize that there's security measures that need to be taken to do things right.
Yeah, I agree. And frankly, it surprises me that, we've had technology in the workplace for more than 20 years now, and still we have that level of, just kind of a basic knowledge. People could know how to log onto their computers at work, but, they don't necessarily know how to use the technology outside. Right. And a lot of that is, I think, has been fomented by the fact that so many organizations for a long time just didn't even allow remote work to happen. Right. And so now, everybody's got to get used to it. But along with that also kind of changes the game for technology and in general, and the way users interact with technology, and the way organizations view what is what the workday is. And now moving forward. So I think we're going to see a lot of changes in 2021 related to just the way organizations work beyond, the security implications and, making sure that folks are safe, but they're also productive at any time of day. And right. We're going to see that, the traditional constructs of a workday, I think, go away. So
definitely. I mean, one thing that we were thinking about when things really started to happen, or maybe just right after they happened, was, everybody got sent home to work, but that enabling of remote users was done remotely. So that the people that did that did it remotely. So we were looking back at the way the administrators were working, and things are changing quite a bit there. So we started looking at, from an identity perspective, how is the administrator identity different? And we've developed some things like just-in-time provisioning. So like me as an admin, I don't have an admin account that is privileged all the time. And when I go to my PAM solution and I check that out, that it'll actually permission it correctly while I'm using it. And then when I check it back in, it does things like change passwords, disable accounts, but it's also stripping roles and membership so that the account is basically anonymous and useless when not in use. And that helps quite a bit.
Yeah, I can imagine, especially in organizations where you've got a large number of users that have to do things at any particular time of day. So I imagine that helps keep things locked down. So what do you think is going to be happening in the new year as we progress through the pandemic and maybe we get the vaccines and things quite start to kind of calm down a little bit, and we do have a little more freedom to work in the office or at home do you think we're ever really going to move back to a full company, on-site work environment, or are we going to move to hybrid, or what do you think?
I was trying to predict that the other day while talking to one of our, frequently traveling cohort of mine. And, we miss being in front of customers and sitting in a conference room and having, valuable conversations. But you wonder if, just because we're willing to travel, is there going to be anywhere to travel to? So is the way we do business, the way they do business has changed. So we're going to be doing things differently. And, we're learning how to do like we're doing right now and communicating and developing relationships via these webcams and things like that. But I think, I have several acquaintances and friends that work for different organizations, and they have been told that they're not going to be going back to the office ever. And,
really?
So in reality, a few of them I know have moved out of cold weather because of that. So, and given them opportunities beyond what they had before. And, that's going to be a different way where you don't necessarily know where your user is and or even care because it doesn't matter. So it's almost like employees as a service. It doesn't matter that they're in the building or not. So
that's an interesting concept there. So I agree. I think some organizations kind of jumped the gun when they said they were never going to have their employees come back, and I think some may be rolling back some of those policies as things kind of quiet down, because there are certainly certain job roles that do require being in an office, and they will recognize that some just there needs to be some sort of in-person workforce, unfortunately, for the others who do have the opportunity to work remotely. But yeah, I think some organizations will adhere to that. They're going to stick with an all remote, all the time workforce. But I think that definitely does change the just what we consider to be what is the workplace in the future. Even if organizations do let their employees come back, I think we're going to see some changes in the office environment in general. This has much larger ramifications, I think, than just whether you're working in your living room or in the office. I think we're going to see issues regarding personal spaces and everything.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
It's
absolutely
a different mentality. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's, some people make that change very easily. And then others, really, if you work in healthcare or something like, obviously, for the most part, you're going to be seeing somebody face to face. But, for situations where I need to create something or develop something remotely, it just seems to be the way to go.
Yeah.
But we do need to look at the vulnerabilities of having a user connected to your network remotely, and how you configure your network, how the user's configured, how the user's trained, and all of the pieces that go with that, beyond just don't click links and that kind of stuff. They need to understand the why behind it, and then they can make logical decisions. When the attackers change their techniques, it'll be very obvious to them.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Education is key, I think, especially moving forward in 2021. So regardless of whether we're all remote or not. So Dan, thanks so much for your time. I appreciate it. As always, great conversation. Appreciate it. And then if folks are interested in taking a look at the Microsoft Active Directory report that you guys came out with that we referenced earlier, is it on the website?
Yes, it is. So oneidentity.com.
Okay. All right. Great. Well, thanks again for your time and your expertise, as always. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Charlene.
All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so stay tuned. Everybody, happy Thursday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with the webinars preview. As always, I tell you we have some great webinars coming up on DevOps.com, Container Journal, and Security Boulevard. Wanted to give you just a quick overview, if you will, of some webinars that are coming up quickly in the hopes that you can mark your calendar and attend. The first webinar I have is how to implement best practices for DevOps test environments. It's happening Tuesday, February 2nd at 11 a.m. Eastern on DevOps.com, and it's sponsored by Plutora. This webinar features Mark Hornbeek, who is the CEO and principal consultant at engineeringdevops.com, and Jeffrey Keyes, who is the VP of product at Plutora. And they're going to look at how organizations can evolve their test management environments for software testing in a DevOps value stream, from a basic dedicated environment to a dynamic and efficient ephemeral test environment. Some of the key takeaways from the webinar include logical development phases of test management environments for DevOps, criteria for evaluating each phase of test management environments, comparing the pros and cons of each phase and with some customer use cases, offering a compatibility chart for evaluating your test management environment against best practices, and finally, ROI method for justify developing your test management toward best practices. Good stuff. Next up, we have Too Close to the Sunburst, a supply chain compromise. This one is happening Wednesday, February 3rd at 11 a.m. on Security Boulevard. This one is really going to be interesting. It is an interactive crisis simulation webinar that is modeled after the recent SolarWinds attack. And using Immersive Labs Cyber Crisis Simulator and Technical Labs, this webinar will put attendees in the position to investigate how, the compromising of software in their supply chain impacts the security of their business, and what actions, if any, an organization needs to take. So some of the outcomes from the webinar include attendees will be able to see the impact of the human element in incident management and response. They'll be able to gain a greater understanding of how decisions in a major cyber attack have a business-wide impact, and also experience Sunburst via the Immersive Labs, Technical Labs. That one I am super excited about. I think it's going to be a really, really fascinating webinar. I hope you can join me for that one for sure. All right, finally, we have 50 million data transactions a day with Cassandra. That one is happening Wednesday, February 3rd as well. This one is at 1 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com, and it's sponsored by DataStax. This is a case study of sorts on a company called Lockstat, which uses both geospatial and real-time rules engine engineering in its products and solutions for its customers that range government, defense, safety and security, mining, finance, and retail industries. Their technology is powered by Cassandra and other open source solutions to provide its clients with innovative IoT solutions, such as geospatial risk management for a marine mining company that uses ships to extract minerals from the seabed. That's kind of cool. Okay, in this webinar, the CTO and Managing Director of Lockstat, Rhino Goosen, will cover things such as how the team decided what open source technologies to use, why they decided to use DataStax Enterprise for their solution, and how their solutions are able to scale with zero downtime. That is also going to be a really interesting webinar. I hope you can join me for one or all three of these webinars, but we have so many other webinars across the sites, so I do hope you're able to check out what we have coming up. I'll be back on Monday with a new fresh batch of webinars for you. Until then, I hope everybody has a great day, and please, whatever you do, stay safe. All right, welcome back. Next up, we have Mitchell Ashley from Accelerated Strategies Group. His Analyst Corner segment now. They talk about the security of DevOps tool chains and how the SolarWinds attack was much more than just a supply chain attack. It was actually an attack on software build process. So, yikes. Let's give this one a listen.
Hi, and welcome to Analyst Corner. Mitch Ashley, CEO with Accelerated Strategies Group. I'm sure by now we're all very tired of hearing about SolarWinds and all the attacks, supply chain attacks. And yes, we're going to hear more about that and fallout from the systems that were compromised, and supply chain attacks will get more attention, et cetera, et cetera. But I think there's an entirely different thing that happened as part of this whole episode that I think we need to pay a great more attention to. And if you sort of peel away how the hackers got in and the fact that they delivered malicious code through the update servers, at the core, at the center of all that, what they did that I think is particularly dangerous is they placed themselves in the process of how we build software. They actually were in there actively monitoring, watching for a particular piece of code when it would get built in Microsoft Visual Studio. In this case, could be in any number of different platform environments for building code. Happen to be Microsoft Visual Studio. That's when they would identify, is a specific piece of code being built? If that code is being built in, then they watch for the right opportunity for them to replace the built code with a different DLL. And there's some whole sophisticated steps that they went through to do all of this. But they did it in a way that once the software is built, doing something like signing the code or checksums or whatever other methods you might say is the code got integrity, you would never be able to identify that because it happened right in the middle of that building process. They also did things that were very sophisticated about not getting noticed. Now, we always think about hackers breaking into systems and covering their footprints and altering logs and doing all of that kind of stuff. And yes, those things occurred here, but they also were watching not only for processes to occur, but they were careful of what things they did so that the malicious code in the build process didn't garner any attention from the development team or the DevOps engineers. They didn't want to do things like, oh, let's kill this process if we're not going to insert our malicious code on this build. Well, that would create an entry of someone, well, why does this process go away? What is that? Now, they made themselves look like a VMware process, but that could easily get the attention of someone if they see, why are processes getting killed? Why are these things ending? What is this, right? Somebody goes and investigates it. So they tried to stay very low, well under the radar of the development team, so they wouldn't notice this. The point being, the security of our DevOps tool chain, of our software tool chains, is a kind of new, maybe not, this isn't the first time it's happened, but certainly a way that had a huge impact, where if someone can get into the build process and compromise that, kind of all bets are off until you find it. It could be any kind of software. It doesn't have to be software that goes out to an update server to your customers. It could be software that someone used to use for ransomware. Imagine that your software is what's actually going out and encrypting, all of your assets, and for someone who's doing it for financial gain or for others stealing secrets, or you can imagine any number of nefarious uses of this. But the fact that you can get in that software tool chain into that build process is an attack vector that I think we are going to see a lot more attention paid to in 2021 and beyond. Is it going to get solved in the next 10, 11 months? Certainly not. But I think we're going to not have to worry just about application security, but our tools security that we use to create, build, monitor, examine, et cetera, evaluate software. The tools themselves, not just scanning the code that we write using those tools. So look for that. I think it's something we all need to rethink about our strategies around tools for software development, and how do we make sure that those are secure? I certainly don't have all the answers to that. Maybe we'll see some great innovations and startup companies and some new companies enter into that space. I suspect we will. And hopefully help all of us make sure that we're not only developing and writing secure code, but we're releasing secure code as well. Thanks for joining me.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
All right, in our final segment today, we have an interview between Mike Vizard and Shane Johnson, who's the Senior Director of Product Marketing at MariaDB Corp. They talk about MariaDB as an alternative to the MySQL database and why it's gaining traction. So let's give it a listen.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Shane Johnson, who's the Senior Director of Product Marketing for MariaDB. We're going to be talking about all things related to open source relational databases, MySQL. Shane, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. How are you?
I'm good. Hey, what is going on with the adoption of MariaDB these days? We've been talking about it for a while, and there's a lot of, shall we say, some angst in the MySQL community these days. So what kind of progress have you guys been making, and what is the state of things at the moment?
I think what's most, fascinating, encouraging, and exciting is the adoption beyond MariaDB as a traditional relational database. That adoption is still growing. It continues to grow, but with the introduction of Column Store, you can use it as a data warehouse. With the introduction of Expand, you can use it as a distributed SQL database. Some people are doing hybrid workloads with analytics and transactions. And then, of course, SkySQL, our cloud DBaaS, arrived, bringing all of those things to the cloud and making it easy. So the adoption is every bit as aggressive as it's always been, but it's now kind of branching out into a lot of new areas, which I think is great.
In those new areas, are we seeing a lot more convergence of analytics and transaction processing workloads? I mean, we had that in the mainframe forever, but I feel like in the distributed computing world, they were always somewhat isolated from each other. So is that finally converging?
It is. One of the first pleasant surprises when we launched SkySQL was to take a look at what kind of databases people are creating. And I would have expected the vast majority of them to be, your standard transactional database. But it turns out we saw a little bit of an even split. About a third of them were for transactions, about a third of them were for data warehousing, and a third were for hybrid transactions and analytics. And we see, sometimes people discover that on their own, or I'm doing my job and they've otherwise become aware of it. Other times it happens in a conversation where I'm talking with a customer and digging into the requirements and ask about analytics, and sometimes they're genuinely surprised that, oh, we can do both, and the answer is yes. So I think part of it is just educational, for the reasons you were just saying. Is I think it's long been assumed that you're going to have a data warehouse team over in building A, and you're going to have your transactions team over in building B, and every once in a while they'll exchange data, but I think that line is blurring, and it doesn't mean that data warehouses go away. But it does mean that if you're building customer-facing applications, you have access to analytics now, right? If that's to make stronger recommendations or help find new opportunities for your customers, it just gives you another tool that's available to you. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that going forward.
What is it that makes it a challenge for somebody who's already got MySQL in place to move over to MariaDB? It seems like there's still a lot of folks running MySQL. What's your sense of what keeps them there?
What keeps them there? Maybe part of it is just, a little bit of, well, what does it take to migrate? I know it's possible, others have done it, but how much work is it really? What do I have to commit to? And the good news, it's not a lot, but I think it's just more of making everyone, aware that this is easy for you. And funny enough, I also occasionally talk to folks who are using MariaDB and they don't realize it. Especially when I go to conferences, pre-COVID days, when I'm out talking at conferences and I'm at the booth and someone's saying, yeah, I use MySQL on my Linux server. And then, kind of replies, oh, you might not know it, but MariaDB is actually the MySQL instance that's on most Linux distributions today. So you're probably using MariaDB and you might not even realize it because we still maintain compatibility with MySQL. It still looks like MySQL. So there's a little bit of that going on too. And then some of it might just be, kind of tradition, or kind of it's been that way for us for a long time. We've been using MySQL for ages, and it still does, majority of what we need it to do. But, we're happy that more and more people keep finding MariaDB and transitioning from MySQL where they can, and we'll keep at it.
What's the killer reason that people are doing that? They're both open source at the end of the day. So is there a cost benefit, performance benefit? What's the thing?
I think there's a handful of things. I don't know if any single one stands out, but some of the examples would be around, licensing. So MariaDB community, everything is open source, and there's a variety of features there, including things like Oracle database, compatibility, PL/SQL, and so on. Whereas in MySQL, if you jump to MySQL Enterprise, those plugins are proprietary and they remain proprietary. And then there's also a little bit of differences approach on how we collaborate with the community. So we're very transparent, very open. We encourage contributions. We work with lots of different companies to do so. And some people find that MySQL's environment is a little bit more closed. There's really not a lot of involvement or say from the community that they're going to do what they're going to do. And a lot of it is still behind closed doors, even though, it's still open source. So yeah, every once in a while, the source code is dumped and made available, but there's sometimes a lack of participation. And there's also the sense that it's still Oracle, right? So people have challenges with Oracle, whether they're on the proprietary Oracle database, or they're maybe not too thrilled that Oracle also has MySQL and they still feel they're a little bit subject to Oracle. And people just want to break that relationship and find someone else that they can partner with and collaborate with.
Yeah. As you kind of look forward into 2021, what's at the top of the agenda for you guys?
There's a few things. Certainly, at the very top, a singular focus on SkySQL. We know the cloud is where everything's going to be, just given time, right? And there's different people will say that it's this percentage by 2021 or this percentage by 2022. Regardless of who's right or how fast we get there, we will get there, where the majority of databases are going to be running in the cloud. So it's important for us to continue to invest in SkySQL and make that the best way to use MariaDB in the cloud. But the other one that's kind of my passion and my excitement is around expand. So this is relatively new. We just announced not too long ago, but the ability for us to do distributed SQL is really exciting to me. My background prior to being in a marketing role like this was originally in Java development and architecture around distributed systems. So I've always found that space to be really fascinating. I'm excited for us to actually be able to offer a solution there and to make it easy because it's still MariaDB.
Yeah. At least what I'm seeing is developers are exercising more influence over the database choice, and then that kind of gets wrapped up into the DevOps team that kind of starts running that, especially in these cloud environments. What is the function of a DBA going forward? Are DBAs fading away over time? Is it getting subsumed into the DevOps function? What do you see going on?
Yeah, I don't see DBAs going away over time. I think, if anything, the move to the cloud gives them an opportunity on the things that focus, or the opportunity to focus on the things that matter most, instead of the more tedious stuff. I think the value of a DBA is not in their ability to install the database or to perform an upgrade, but the ability to do performance tuning, and to work with application developers to best understand how to optimize that database for them. Or, in the case of MariaDB, we have these different engines, as I mentioned earlier, whether it's transactional or columnar or distributed. And a lot of the times when I'm talking about information education for DBAs in particular, it's about choosing the right things for your database. So you might have a very complex schema, and it's going to be up to you to decide which of those tables should be backed by columnar storage, or which should be distributed, which should be replicated. Those are all things that developers shouldn't be concerned about. They just know, here's an IP address, here's a port, here's your user and password, and I need that to get my data. But how you choose to store that data, or to query that data, or to optimize that data, that's all in the world of the DBA. So I think their jobs, in some regards, get more important and more critical.
We hear a lot about multimodal databases these days, and at the same time, we also hear people are still, picking a database for a particular application, and maybe they worry about other data types later. What's your sense of where are we with this multimodal shift? Is that a legitimate way, or do people really want this kind of polyglot kind of architecture where they have different databases optimized for different use cases?
Yeah, I think that touches on a few things. If I start with the multimodal part, I think in some senses it is a little bit exaggerated. At least, if we use the database market as a whole, there's probably too many categories, right? You probably put a huge list of acronyms and words to describe all these new different types of databases. And if you take a look at DB engines, I said there was something like 300 databases. I think a colleague told me I was wrong, that it's closer to 400 or over 400. There's simply too many databases in the market. And I think what we're not going to do is see that happen in the model itself, where, 3 models isn't enough. I need 4 different ways to model my data. I need 100 different ways to model my data. I think if we're more practical, there's 2 that are really well adopted, the relational model and JSON. I think those represent the bulk of things. That doesn't discount the need for maybe databases that are optimized for graph or time series. But I think for your everyday application, JSON is a little bit of a de facto standard, at least from a web developer point of view. And relational is kind of a standard from the back end. And most relational databases support both. MariaDB supports JSON, so does MySQL, so does Oracle. Most of the big ones, they're all having very rich support for JSON these days. They've come a long way in the past 5, 6, 7 years. But I think the other part of it, beyond the data model, is probably the convergence, right? I mean, we might have 400 databases today. I think that number is going to keep getting smaller and smaller. At some point, we hit the peak, and it kind of going back down, because when I do get on the phone with customers, being in marketing, one of my first questions is, what database are you using? And 9 times out of 10, the answer is all of them, right? Pick a category, pick a database, we're using it somewhere. But no one's necessarily thrilled about that, especially from an operational standpoint. Whoever the DBAs are, or the SREs, or kind of the data infrastructure managers, not thrilled that they have all these different databases with different technologies, different support contracts, different vendors. And I think they are looking for consolidation. I think hybrid transactions and analytics is a little bit of that, kind of the notion that maybe these things can come together. I think relational and JSON is an example of that, of these things kind of coming together. So I do think that, in the market, and particularly in the case of MariaDB, that we're going to keep building a database that does a lot of things and does them very well, so that you don't have to have a million different databases deployed.
Do we still need to be concerned about performance, or have we reached a level where the database can handle just about everything there is at the top end?
Yeah, in a general sense, I don't know that we have to be concerned about performance as much as we did before. We have more cores, we have more memory, we have faster disks. So it's not as critical to optimize every little thing because you have components that are becoming bottlenecks for you. That's the good news. But there are still scalability challenges. I was talking to a colleague the other day. We were working with a company that has POS systems, right? Brick and mortar stores, and lots of them. And they're going to have a little database in each of these locations. But when they move online, they have a website now, and that database is basically doing the equivalent of all of those locations, plus a whole lot more because it's so convenient. Other people that wouldn't have gone to the store, but they're doing their shopping online. So the pressure is increasing on databases every bit as fast or faster than the hardware is growing at the same time. And I think you end up with a range of scalability needs. On one end, maybe you're doing microservices and you have one database per microservice. That database probably isn't going to be challenged too much. It's just doing a slice of the workload. But then you start to look at things like the Internet of Things, or financial trading, or e-commerce, where the scope is now potentially millions of customers on your website, and they're all adding things to the cart, and they're making purchases, or you're trying to track clickstream data. As that number grows, the pressure gets a lot higher. I think the other one that I was using to kind of demonstrate this is, if you think about going to the store, the throughput isn't very high, right? You get in line, and if you're not the first, maybe it's a minute wait or a couple minutes wait. If you're 4 or 5 people back, 10, 15 minutes, and maybe there's 6 cashiers, and you're thinking the throughput is what, 6 transactions per minute in the store. But when we do online, we're talking about tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, in the most extreme cases, millions of transactions per second. So then, performance is an issue, but only in the sense that you need scalability to maintain that performance. So if you had 100 customers, the performance was happy. But when it grew from 100 customers to 1 million customers, what can you do to maintain that performance as your customer count grows and the pressure grows?
Cool. Hey, Shane, I want to thank you for being on the show and sharing your expertise.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
All right. And back to you guys in the studio.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, Devsecops, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
All right, everybody, that wraps up another edition of the TechStrong TV streaming broadcast. I hope you enjoyed today's conversations as much as I did. We will be back on Monday with a new episode, and I'm looking forward to that one as well. I know we have a great lineup of interviews and conversations in that episode, so I hope you can join us for that one. I also hope everybody has a great weekend. We'll see you on Monday. Until then, please stay safe.